Thank you, Barbara. Well, we all had a little bit of a scare last week on Wednesday when Mr. Edwards came over for his routine physical therapy, and examination of the hand showed that there was not adequate or maybe any blood flow getting into it. So we had to take him back to the operating room and an all-night procedure again. I think we started at about 9 o'clock and finished at 3 in the morning or something. We reestablished blood flow. And he's doing well at this point, which is good. But any episode like this is never necessarily good for the hand. Normally, when you reattach a hand which has been amputated or when you're transplanting it, by 2 weeks post-operatively, you're normally out of the danger zone. And for reasons that we're not completely clear on, he was not. So he's doing well now. We've had to treat the two hands separately now because of this. So as long as I can get my right and my left straight here. The left hand, as you saw before, is making close to a full fist, is continuing on the regular protocol. The right hand, which was not making as good a fist before, had about half a fist and also had a lot more damage to it from the initial burn, is now in a position that we're going to wait a week or so before we start him on therapy again, because we don't want to have to go through an episode where we lose blood flow. So the two hands are going to separate a little bit in terms of the progression they're going to make. I think in the end, unfortunately, this episode will downgrade the ultimate result we could get, maybe, because we're going to leave him for a while to make sure that the blood flow gets into that hand properly and that we don't stir it up or upset it again so we would lose it. It's also a period of time we'd like to be doing aggressive therapy. But I think that if we start aggressive therapy again, we could find ourselves in a situation that we would lose the blood flow, so we're going to need to leave it for a while. That results in some increased scarring, and it means a more difficult post-operative therapy course in terms of getting the tendons and everything loose. So the good news is the hand is on, and everything's looking good. The bad news was that he had to go back for a redo, literally a plumbing job where we have to rehook things up because they've got clogged up, and this will slow down his therapy a little bit. So that's it, and I'll answer any questions that you have. Yes?
Do you think long-term it will affect then the performance of that hand?
Yes, and I think the performance of the right hand from the very beginning was less than the left. The right arm was it was burnt, and on the right side he had had a surgical procedure where they had taken out one of his two arteries that went to his hand. So we had some problems that were larger on the right than the left to begin with, so we started with less. And I think now we run the risk of getting some increased scarring. Now we can do things about that later. We can open it up and release the scar. But in general, I would say the left hand's probably going to have better function than the right. But we'll wait and see. I still think that he's going to end up with a lot. That being said, I still think he's going to end up with a lot better function on both hands, including the right, than many of the previous transplants and many of our own transplants, because, again, we have good structures that are connected to good structures. None of that hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is we're going to have to sit for a while when scar tissue can form, and we'd like to not do that. But I'm afraid if we move, we may not let the vessels and everything mature. Remember, he left here doing his therapy. Everything's fine. He was actually out when this event took place, and that's a little unusual.
And you mentioned normally being out of the danger zone within a couple of weeks. Do you still consider then the right hand to be in the danger zone or out now?
Well, we're back. The minute you operate, you go back to square one in terms of the danger zone for the vessels. So in terms of those vessels that were reconstructed, we're getting to a state that we feel much more comfortable. As a matter of fact, I kind of skipped this, so I won't bore all of you with too many details, but his temperatures for the 24, 48 hours on the thumb, well, let me back up so I can explain this. Everybody's hand is supplied by two arteries. If you clamp one of the arteries, almost always the other artery is sufficient to keep blood flow to the hand. Okay? Now, as you get older or you get blockage, that may not be true, but certainly someone who is 40 or 50 and doesn't have diabetes or smokes too much, that shouldn't be a problem. For some reason, from day one on the right hand, we had trouble with blood flow to the thumb and the index. After we redid this operation on Wednesday night again, well, first of all, on Wednesday, when he lost circulation, he lost it in the whole hand. But again, when we hooked it up, it was still the thumb and the index that lagged behind. And for 48 hours, the thumb and index were kind of had poor flow. And on Saturday morning, we were getting ready to maybe go back in the operating room and take a look at it. We actually got him down to the operating room, got it all uncovered, and everything looked good. So that's the kind of world I live in. You know, it can go up and down for a few days, and we're very used to this. You know, I mean, Kleiner Kutz pioneered, my senior partners pioneered these techniques along with other people around the world, and we know those 2 or 3 days after you reattach something and hook up the vessels, it can really go up and down. So he's past the most critical period. He's been stable with good temperatures on that hand now for, well, since Thursday morning would be our first day. But I'm still going to watch him for 2 weeks. You know, just be very careful.